Hello and welcome. My name is Shannon Kemp, and I'm the Chief Digital Officer for DATAVERSITY. We want to thank you for joining the latest in the monthly webinar series, Data Architecture Strategies with Donna Burbank. Today, Donna will discuss building the right architecture for analytics and reporting, sponsored today by Reltio. Just a couple of points to get us started. Due to the large number of people that attend these sessions, you will be muted during the webinar. For questions, we'll be collecting them by the Q&A panel. And if you'd like to chat with us or with each other, we certainly encourage you to do so. And just to note, the chat defaults to send to just the panelists. We absolutely change that to network with everyone. To open the chat and the Q&A panels, you'll find those icons in the bottom middle of your screen for those features. And as always, we will send a follow-up email within 2 business days containing links to the slides, the recording of the session, and any additional information requested throughout the webinar. Now, let me turn it over to Sriraj for a brief word from our sponsor, Reltio. Sriraj, hello and welcome.
Thank you, Shannon. And let me share my screen. Are you able to see my screen?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, awesome. Hello, welcome, and thank you to everyone who's joined us today. My name is Sriraj. I'm part of the Reltio product management team based in Seattle, and excited to talk to you all about how Reltio is helping change the data management landscape. Before we get into today's session with Donna, I would like to spend a few minutes talking about some of the challenges we've been seeing in data management, especially, and how some of our customers have been solving them. So let's get right into it. There's been an explosion of organizational data initiatives, as you can imagine, with the explosion of AI, ML, and all those associated initiatives. But often what we found is that organizational data initiatives are challenged by what we call as a trust gap. In fact, a survey recently concluded that 77% of decision makers are concerned that their organizational data is neither timely nor reliable for operational, analytical, or AI ML needs out there. This trust gap is often the result of poor quality data in source systems or in operational systems, shaky data governance principles, as well as a lack of skills around managing and stewarding data. To illustrate this, often what we see is that laying the foundation for a data-powered enterprise requires comprehensive data strategy. Organizations need to create a unified system of record that is capable of transforming poor quality data from disparate sources into secure, trusted, interoperable data and make it available where and when required. This requires a shift from locking data within existing applications. These are called data traps. Data traps are everywhere, entrusting existing applications, whether it be CRM, ERP, or any existing application in the enterprise landscape to manage and steward your data assets only makes the problem worse. These systems often trap data within proprietary technology and run counterproductive to creating the 360-degree view that enterprises desire in order to unleash the transformation required. This is where Reltio comes in. Reltio's data cloud, comprising of master data management as well as our customer 360 solutions, is the industry leader in creating unified, trusted data assets and has numerous deployments where such data is used for real-time operational applications with sub-second response time. Reltio's platform is built for today's AI demands and incorporates industry-specific AI models to identify, cleanse, deduplicate, enrich, and deliver core data assets critical for the enterprise. The platform is built with a security-first approach and can scale to process and manage billions of transactional and operational data records. Reltio also provides a highly flexible and customizable data model that can suit any industry or application. Here we see the typical flow of data and how Reltio's data cloud helps bridge the trust gap that I spoke about earlier by enriching and improving data quality, as well as delivering trusted data at the right place and time. On the left side, we have various data sources. These are typically enterprise applications such as CRM, ERP, etc., or data warehouses and data lakes. We also have third-party data enrichment providers that are often seen in the enterprise landscape. Reltio comes out of the box with thousands of pre-built connectors to help ingest data from any of these sources and internally cleanses, identifies duplicates, and merges datasets to create a golden identity. In this example specifically, we're showing an individual whose identity is signified by the attributes in the yellow color. Reltio can further enrich that identity with additional attributes or third-party attributes that you see in the white circle. These could be their purchases, their surveys, their responses, and certs. Further, Reltio can also ingest transactions and create a 360-degree view of the customer, of not just their identity and third-party attributes, but also their interactions and transactions with the customer, with your organization, such as phone calls and emails and help desk tickets and such. All of this can be used to create derived attributes, such as propensity scores, lifetime value, net promoter score, amongst others. From there on, this trusted unified data can be segmented and delivered downstream to marketing applications, sales applications, cloud data warehouses, AI, ML, ultimately enabling various business critical initiatives that you see on the right side. To learn more about this and other customer stories and our solutions, you can scan this QR code and learn more at reltio.com. Back to you, Shannon.
Raj, thank you so much for kicking us off. So, and you have questions for him about Reltio, you may submit your questions in the Q&A panel, as he'll be joining us in the Q&A portion at the end of the webinar today. And now let me introduce to you the speaker of the monthly series, Donna Burbank. Donna is a recognized industry expert in information management with over 20 years of experience helping organizations enrich their business opportunities through data and information. She currently is the managing director of Global Data Strategy Limited, where she assists organizations around the globe in driving value from their data. And with that, let me give the floor to Donna to begin her presentation. Hello and welcome.
Hello, Shannon. Good to have you back. And yeah, good. Thanks for everyone joining this webinar series. For folks that might be new to DATAVERSITY or new to this particular series, it is a series. So you'll see we've had other topics this year on some trends in data architecture, how a data strategy fits with a data architecture. And Shannon will mention this again, obviously, that DATAVERSITY is very good about saving all of these on recording on their website. So if you missed anything, you can always catch this. This will also be on recording as well as on our website. We link to that as well. And maybe you can catch some of our other sessions this year. But let's dive into this topic, which is data architecture, and particularly data architecture for analytics and reporting. And Shiraz mentioned a little bit of that already. There's a lot to data analytics and reporting now. Your good old BI and traditional reporting. There's AI. There's advanced analytics, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess as a data architect, we need to think what's changed, what stayed the same. It can get very confusing and overwhelming. And so what we try to do in these webinars is maybe demystify some of the topics and maybe give some ideas of where to start. So, this is based on a survey that DATAVERSITY and Global Data Strategy did together, and we had done this over several years now. And the number one, when we ask participants, and you might have participated, what your number one goal is, and this was data management, kind of the cousin of data architecture, I realize, but basically, why are you doing data stuff, right? Number one, year over year, is always gaining insights through reporting and analytics. And there's a reason for that. That's really helpful to drive the business. So you could say, has anything changed and what stayed the same, which is kind of where we'll head in this presentation. So you might wonder, where's Donna going here? Donna does sometimes her funny stories, but what I find interesting, you could be sort of, I don't know, snarky and just say, nothing's changed. We've been doing this sort of thing. These are hieroglyphics from Egypt. And what I found interesting, I remember I went to Egypt. I was probably the only person on the tour that thought of this, is a lot of the hieroglyphics that we think are so profound and interesting. We're literally just, counting barrels of, wheat or grain, invoices. And it was really your early BI or your early spreadsheet, your early reporting, because that need to count things and sell things and make sure your inventory is correct, that was early data architecture, data management, right? Should we be doing things on stone walls anymore? Probably not scalable. So now we have something that maybe looks like this, which is your sort of Acme Inc. sales dashboard with, how many widgets did we sell by year and what's your revenue by region. And before you may scoff and say, Donna's old-fashioned, she's talking about BI when we're talking about AI and machine analytics. If you haven't heard me present before, you'll probably hear me say it again. It's a both and, right? I mean, we at Global Data Strategy work with companies all over the globe, some of the largest names on the planet you've heard of. And the majority of companies are still struggling with this because it is not easy. There's whole solutions out there. I mean, Reltio is one that helps support of how do we get a single view of our products? Do we even know that the product codes are right? How do we uniquely identify a customer, the customer and Shiraz's example, right? That's complicated. And then how do you sum it up and slice it and dice it? And are we slicing I was just in a workshop all week for several days with a client just trying to get single definitions of the metrics on their dashboard, right? This will not go away. It's still a challenge because business is challenging. There's if anyone knows Karen Lopez, who often speaks for Dataversity as well, she's got a great saying. It's like, if you want your data to be if you don't want your data to be complicated, you stop making the world complicated and get back to me, right? Because there are nuanced business rules that the data is from disparate systems, et cetera, et cetera. So this will, and continue will be a challenge, just like counting your wheat barrels, years ago was as well. However, things have changed and evolved, and I say all the time, it is a really fun time to be in data management. We've had a good run. Things are changing drastically. So we do have things like AI, or is it really that new, right? If I'm going to be the contrarian here. I remember in college doing natural language processing and AI, and this is an example. I'm not that old, but I remember playing with this, right? Eliza, if anyone played with it, it was kind of a really early kind of an AI where it sort of represented a really bad therapist, if that makes sense. Almost your stereotypically bad therapist. You'd say, hello, I'm Eliza. I'm very sad. How long have you been sad? A long time. Tell me more. Did you come to me because you're sad? And if you keep going, it's asking all the, are you sad because of your childhood? Tell me more. They don't ever really say anything. It's just this kind of series of scripted prompts. So that coding technology, that data management, philosophy isn't particularly new. But what is new then? I mean, now we have ChatGPT. So I had a little fun. I almost did the same thing with ChatGPT. I'm very sad. So there's a few more words. I'm sorry you're feeling sad. Do you want to talk about being sad? And they've added some emojis, right? We have blue emojis, where in the past we had a green screen. But is that really different? Maybe not. And I didn't pick the ultimate example for ChatGPT, but you could say that's really the stuff we've been doing for ages. This isn't all that complicated. We did that in our basic computer science courses way back in the day. However, we all know that things are drastically changing, and now we can do things like show me a picture of a frog on a bicycle and it finds one, right? That is, I think, a sea change. Things we could not do back in the day. They could not do that back in the 1960s. So really, what has changed to let us go? And a lot of that is architecture, right? And what do we mean by architecture? I won't get philosophical, but there's system architecture, there's platform architecture. Here we tend to talk about data architecture. I recall, we'll get into that, but some of the things you can do now. Okay, it's sort of fun to say frog on a bicycle. I'm sure you've all played with this and found strange things to find pictures of, and it does a pretty darn good job. But there are real world applications, right? We've all done kind of SQL queries to try to find the part number we're looking for. But there's use cases of I'm out on the field trying to do repairs on a plane, and I take a picture of the part, and it can bring back the part number, right? That is a really real world example of something really cool. I mean, I've done it. I have a plant identifier, right? I take a picture of a plant, it tells me what the plant is. I mean, things are drastically sea level different than writing a simple query and having some of these prompt level, quote, AI in quotes. And there's a lot more nuance to that. So what really has changed across, and again, I mentioned before, there's software, there's hardware, there's platforms. I remember back in the day, I know I'm a geek, but I'm proud of being a geek. I had a friend who was an electrical engineer, and I used to argue with him all the time that it's software is way more important. What you're doing is just hardware. That's not interesting at all. And they said, no, nothing can happen without the hardware, right? And the chips and all of that. Well, I'm not going to go as far to say that they were right, but might have been right? A lot of what has changed is the storage capacity, the fact that we have cloud, the fact that we have, we'll get into the, the microchip revolution and things like that. So you're probably all familiar with Moore's law, basically storage doubles every 2 years. Is it slowing down? Maybe slightly. Are there things replacing it? Absolutely. But we can do a lot more things now because of the storage capacity, the processing capacity, and yeah, the hardware or the cloud hardware, right? The cloud is just, you're doing it on somebody else's machine, right? It isn't literally in the cloud. Hate to break that to anyone who might be new. I'm kidding, obviously. But that is what's interesting. I had a friend, I'm here in the Boulder, Colorado area, and we have NCAR, which is the National Atmospheric Research, and a friend of mine does weather science, and his father did weather science, and he said, I am retiring, but I am so jealous. We used to have to go to this big building in Wyoming that was literally a big computer to go run our programs. Now what you can even do on your laptop and with open data sets, and just discovering new weather patterns or doing interesting things with weather data. It's like it's amazing. You have the world at your fingertips, that in a way, partly because of the storage hardware processing, and the how easy it is to do things on the cloud, that you can spin up even test cases that we never could before, right? When you have to have everything and have your own hardware. So although I'm a data architect and I'm very passionate about how you structure the data, the hardware and the software, I mean, the hardware and the capacity is a major sea change. Even more so is this idea of GPUs, right? And this is kind of maybe a facetious example too. Before this was storage, right? This graph shows storage growth. This graph shows NVIDIA stock growth. So if you were smart enough to buy in 2021, you're probably not in this webinar. You're retired. No, but the why is NVIDIA stock price going up is because of this idea of the new processing capacity, right? So a GPU, we can, I don't know who's a gamer, but gaming software is a big driver of some of this, right? That you can do this 3D rendering that helps you do things like AI processing, because these are these are dimensional vectors, right? This isn't just doing a simple SQL query to find a frog on a bicycle, right? So this is partly why the growth in data centers, and a lot of this is you need a whole lot of storage and power to be doing this to drive some of the architecture that we're looking to do. So I, again, a data architect, but super fascinated by all this. I won't even get into things like quantum computing and things like that. But there is just drastic changes from what we had in terms of storage in the past. On that note, in terms of this idea of a vector database, again, this could be a whole webinar. It's not this one, but I wanted to at least bring it up. I mean, that does allow you to do things like take the picture of, how do we find a picture of a green frog on a bicycle? One of it is to break out the images. So a lot of what we see when we talk about AI that I find just, the mind blowing is, the creating pictures of humans that don't exist, and the Gen AI of pictures and people's voices and things like that. That really is, I want to say just because it's amazing, but the recognizing patterns, and those patterns are those 3D those vectors of a point in time of every pixel on that picture can be translated to a vector, which is basically just a string of numbers, right? Then on top of that, you can add the semantic meaning of the fact that this is a frog on a bicycle, right? We all do the what is it? Everyone loves this when you're trying to say, are you a human? And I guess I'm not, because I can never see how many lampposts there are or whatever. We seem to get those wrong, but that's helping to train some of these things. I know I'm mixing some metaphors here, but this idea is completely new. And like we showed with that example of finding the part number, isn't just fun things when you're bored on a Saturday afternoon and want to find funny pictures, but it can actually help be, directly affect your business and have some new business models. So I think if you're not looking at some of these use cases in your org, and you only are doing things like good tried and true SQL, it may be interesting to kind of look into some of this and kind of expand your horizons and see where there may be some use cases for this. Obviously with governance and all of that we need to do, and ethics and things like that. But there are some significantly new things at our fingertips that we just didn't have back in the day, right? So I think something to look at and something to think of when we think of architecture, and how architecture can kind of drive our business decisions, right? And it is a both and. Like I said, you can combine both worlds, right? What is the part number for this item? Do we have a common hierarchy for when we do have the image recognition for that? Do we have something like a RELTO that helps you with the hierarchy of part numbers? And is this the right part number? And then do we have a data warehouse that you can say, this part number rolls up into a product, and this product is a widget one in this region, all of that. They both are necessary, and they both have their own use case. So, which makes it kind of fun. There's a lot of opportunity out there. So this, I like to say it's an evolution of architectures, or I'd even say ecosystems. What is nice is that we build on the shoulders of giants, right? Our data warehouses and the idea of a fact and dimension table still relevant? Yes. Is there now also AI? Yes. Is there really fun ways to combine these things and have really interesting ecosystems? Yes. And so that's what I find fun, stressful at times as we try to keep up with things because the industry changes. And I always feel, even though I've done this for a long time and I really do try to stay on top of things, always a step behind because things just change, right? But I think you can feel also good about yourself that a lot of the things we have learned still are valid. They're just evolving, and you can take some of those skills and apply them to new test cases. So this is your good old fashioned, tried and true data warehouse, master data management, ETL, that I still see working. I still see valid use cases for that. That's this, how many widgets did we sell by region? And that's where, and Shiraz touched on some of this. So you have a lot of this in your operational systems, the sales invoices and who sold what when and who bought what when. But you really want to roll that up. So that's where your ETL, right? You transform what rules do I want to how do I format first name? How do I join up customers? That's where your master data comes in. Do I have the right customer with the right product with the right vendor? That all of that hard work needs to be done to structure it in a way that you can slice and dice over time. I'm a fan of a semantic layer, which is your old-fashioned cube, right? Where you want to slice and dice and create some reusable definitions. We've just gone through the governance committee and said, yes, this is how we calculate total sales by region. Well, put that in a reusable metric that everyone can drag and drop onto their dashboard, right? And so I think this model is still fine, is still valid. Can't forget the row up top, which is your data catalog and metadata. Now that we've come up with the definition of total sales by region, crazy idea, let's publish it out. And make sure everybody knows about it and uses it and can see the lineage of where the data came from for that. So this still is a nice, clean, very usable ecosystem, whether it's on the cloud, whether it's on-prem. I still see both. Doesn't mean everyone has to go to the cloud, or a lot of people going to cloud. Yes. Could this be a hybrid, on-prem and cloud mix, multi-cloud? All of that is still valid, but these fundamentals still apply, that you have the data in a thing, you need to transform it to another way to report on it, and you report on it consistently. However, things have changed. I really like this pattern of a data lake house. I was a skeptic in the beginning because of the silly name. Whoever came up with it, I'm sorry if I offended you, but it is kind of we love our silly names in the industry. But this, I think, speaks to the best of both worlds. And I'm saying this at a high level. Each one of these is a detailed discussion, but a lot of things still are the same. You still are going to have operational data in your CRM, in your sales system, in all of your operational systems. And you can also get some of these new storage for your picture of the green frog, right? Your picture of your parts, sensor data from trucks delivering the products, log files from customer service talking to customers about the products, social media with customers talking about the products and how much they like it or don't like it, etc. Right? All of this is the real world. You can throw documents in there, right? The world's your oyster now, because you can, with the extra storage capacity and with a lot of the new tools that have come out, a lot of this did always exist, more so now, of course. But how do we get that 360 view of your customer product, etc.? So that's where this idea of a data lake might come in, where you can land that raw unstructured data, and maybe this concept of, before we had ETL, where I'm going to extract it, transform it, and load it. I'm going to take customer name, and I'm going to transform it into 8 characters. And in Shiraz's example, it was a Latino name, so which is the family name and which is the middle name, and how many last names do we include? And all that stuff still needs to be done and can be very complicated. And then you put it into the warehouse. Now, you still do need to do that. You need to transform. Nothing magic, and don't trust any vendor that just says you press the button and magic happens, right? Because it still doesn't. We have good new tools, but you still have to do that hard work. You can do this concept of LT, right? Because before, I'm sorry to keep making you dizzy, but you kind of made some choices. You didn't have the storage you had before, and you sort of picked what you were going to transform. And we only loaded the customer name and the product name and the invoice data and reported on that. And if you wanted to add more in, you kind of had to go back in. Now you still kind of have to do that because magic doesn't happen, but you can still maybe keep all of that raw data stored. So if you want to point data science against the raw, you could, or you ever want to go back to the raw data, and then you still transform it to the warehouse. So those decisions are made, but you can still keep kind of everything. So you can keep both your structured data, you can also keep your unstructured data in kind of this data lake raw storage. So that allows you to still do your data warehouse, your semantic layer, your reporting, and your traditional BI. No stone tablets here, but yes, you can still do the BI. And you can do some of these advanced analytics on that, either the structured and or unstructured, and or point it to the warehouse and or point it to master data, right? I'm sort of skipping over master data, but it's not the focus of this. I think it's one coming up in a few months. We'll talk about master data, but that is, and Reltio talked a little bit about this. That's your core. Those are your golden nuggets or gray nuggets. I think in this picture of those building blocks, customers, products, vendors. You can't. I don't care if you're doing AI, LLM, graph, all this great stuff. If you're trying to link up customers and products and vendors and you don't have a clean list of your products and vendors and customers, garbage in, garbage out. Whether, the fancier the analytics, you just have even fancier mess, right? So, I mean, that's where master data comes in. Everybody loves master data, whether you're a data scientist or a BI person or operational user trying to send out invoices. You want to have the right product vendors address, crazy idea. So I'm a fan of master data because it fixes everything, and that can and will be its webinar in and of itself. But that is still part of a modern data architecture, and even more so because there's so many moving pieces. So I think this idea of a data lakehouse kind of can combine the best of both worlds, where you can have that unstructured, you can have the data lake, you can also have the structured. Are there other patterns here? Graph is one, and I've had a question: should that be in your storage or in your reporting? Well, I'm a fan of still using some of the tried and true relational databases for some of your storage of things like master data, or even because you have to do that cleansing. Then you can build graphs on top of that because you're building a graph on a clean list of customers and products. I want to see a graph databases. I want to see patterns between my customers, who's hanging out with who's talking to whom on the phone, and things like that. And your nodes on your graph are going to be your customers, right? If in that particular use case. So that's where master data can help with that. You've got a nice clean list. Can you also use graph relationships to kind of define master data? I've seen folks kind of do that as an early cut, to discover some patterns, but I still am a fan of keeping your master data in the hierarchies around your master data, kind of as that relational store or hierarchical store. So the good news in this world is it is a both and a lot of the vendors, especially with this cloud environment, do give you a lot of those tools kind of all in one platform. So you can have a relational database. You can have an analytics database that's optimized for performance. You can play around with graph. You can have some AI tools, and you don't have to just go all in on one, right? In the old days, where that kind of gray world on the left, you kind of had to make that decision. I'm going to build a data warehouse. We're going to put it on Oracle. We're going to buy the hardware, or Teradata. We're going to buy the embedded hardware and things. And you kind of were bought in. Now it is sort of fun and interesting and scalable with these cloud platforms. You can mix and match and have an ecosystem of these different tools and environments, and you can have a NoSQL pattern for your website, and you could have a relational pattern for your operational data store. You can try some graph analytics. And you don't have to, and you can kind of try it out, right? Because a lot of these, do things get expensive? Cloud isn't free. I think you all know that if you've tried it, you can build up some bills very quickly, so be careful. But it does allow you to kind of play around with some of these and have a mix and match architecture to really do some of these best of both worlds capabilities. So it is a very interesting time, and the capabilities exist that didn't in the past, and you don't have to buy in so much from the very beginning. So something to think of there. So back to our picture, when we think of these components of a modern data architecture, how do we go back to that story we had before where we have a mix of, trying to do, I don't know, video recognition of parts, and we wanted to also then sum that up by BI. So I just thought we'd kind of go to this fictitious, very high level, I know, architecture, and kind of just go through some of these examples. So I want to do something like show me product sales trends over time. How many widgets did we sell in Widget World in each of the regions by major customer, right? You're going to take it from your operational system, which are typically still a relational database. Maybe you want to land that in a raw landing area. Just keep it, just don't transform it at all. Just, EELT, right? Then we may want to transform it into your facts and dimensions. You can, but it's a whole lot better to have what we call conform dimensions, which means, yes, I have a single view of customer across all my organization that's clean and rationalized. And so that's where something like a master data hub can come in. And then you may want to do a semantic layer and then report on that in your BI report. You could, and I've seen it, you could just take a BI report and throw it against your operational system. That could either be operational reporting, or you're overloading your BI with a lot of the stuff that should properly be done in a warehouse. I've been seeing a lot more trends on that. Partly kudos to the BI tools. It is very easy to sort of point things against the source and even do kind of mini, cubish fact and dimension type models in your BI. And that's fine for a test. You will have some trouble with scalability because the BI is not scaled like a warehouse, and you still have to do the hard stuff of governance to make and master data and things like that to make sure you have the data quality and all of that. So I think it's fine for a test. I wouldn't scale that globally at a company. So, but just a trend I've been seeing that people seem to do that, and then they get some success with interest in those reports. And then at some point it maxes out and they can't scale, and you're going to have to kind of have a more proper architecture behind it. So another one is that, what's the part number for this item? That might be really more of a graphic. I have a picture of the part. I want to put that into my data lake, kind of do some pattern recognition. And then, yes, of course, you'd have to join that up with your warehouse or master data to get the actual part number. But a lot of that is some of that more AI stuff that we were talking about that's pretty cool. We didn't do that. I didn't do that back in the day. If someone did, I'd like to hear about it. But that's pretty cool to me. So, or show me the correct product info on the website, right? And I know sometimes we think of sometimes we don't think about master data at all, which I think is wrong. It makes me sad. But more and more companies we're coming from, really understand, or that we're working with, that understand that master data truly is driving their organization. And folks will come to us and say, we're trying to sell more product on the website, but our product hierarchies are different, or our product hierarchies aren't matching between sales and marketing and operations and the finance system and our website. And sometimes that's okay, but sometimes it isn't, because you're trying to understand all of these great things in your analytics. You can't do that. So something is simple. I mean, Amazon has really good master data, right? And so master data can drive a lot of these great use cases that we're talking about. So that it's core. It isn't always front and center. I think master data on the website is, but sometimes it's an enabler. So sometimes it's forgotten because it's just that little engine that could behind everything that folks don't necessarily see. It's not your front end app like business intelligence is. So, okay, so I've talked a lot. I feel like I've talked a lot, but I guess I'm looking at the clock. I guess I haven't. But we've come a long way, right? From hieroglyphs to, microchips and storage patterns and cloud, and whether it's on-prem, and a lot of that, which has driven some of the changes. And then we kind of talk more, maybe that's more system architecture, enterprise, data architecture of how do all these components fit together. But I don't want to forget the actual how you structure the data in these databases. And I do feel like I get nervous that enough folks don't think of that, because this stuff, can be kind of sexy and fun. And we think of what platform and what cloud vendor and what software we're going to buy. Well, in this little database cylinder, how are you structuring the data? Is it relational, dimensional, key value store, knowledge graph? Is it a, data vault? That's a huge decision that you don't take lightly. So I wanted to have a section on that, because to me, and words mean things, and we as an industry are terrible about using the same words for the same thing. You say the word architecture, all of those things I described are architecture. So which one are we talking about when you say you're a data architect? Are you a systems architect? Are you a data modeler? Are you, all of the above, right? So here we're talking more about the modeling aspect of it for BI and analytics specifically, right? And so a little bit of I'm on a soapbox here, but I'm on the soapbox because I hear it too often, right? An absolutely basic query of most organizations on the planet now, whether you're retail or nonprofit, it's how many things I want to see in this example trending over time to slice and dice my product data by region, by product from a single source of trusted data from all systems, right? So we always use the widget and sales example because we can always relate to it. But this could be, show me all of my students by major, show me all of my patients by gender, right? All of these things, you're reporting on something by something else over time, is typically a data warehouse architecture, right? And I hear this too often because, and I don't want to. It's not always the vendors. It's all of us. Maybe we just want these new flashy things, right? But I hear that I want something. I want to trend something over time by something, but I don't want one of those old-fashioned data warehouses. Can't we use AI? I'm like, not really. Like there's a tool for every toolkit, right? So yeah, I want a picture of a frog on a bicycle and generate, generative AI, or can't we use Gen AI? Or they'll get very specific. And this isn't Gen AI. You're not generating anything. You're reporting on something over time. So can you do these cool other use cases? Yes. But when you're doing this one, I'm still a fan of data quality and master data management and all of that rolled into a nice clean data warehouse. So let's talk about that a little bit. So the good old-fashioned star schema that is still used, right? Because it is a tool in the toolkit that's very helpful. And I am maybe going over this because it may be new, because I'm not, I have just worked with some, data scientists or folks that weren't, and they had a problem they were trying to solve with a different method. And once they saw this method, it would actually made their life a lot easier. So if this is not new to you, that's fine, but it might be new to some people on the call. So they call it a star. Kind of looks like when you do a data model. The facts are the things you're measuring, right? I want to count revenue by, and those tend to be your dimensions, right? I want my revenue by customer, my revenue by product, my revenue by etc. And I start to hear those things by something I think is probably a dimensional model, right? So this is the stuff I want to report on in your fact, and these are the dimensions of the things you want to report by. Often it's your master data that feeds those. That's your fancy word, it's the conform dimension, which just means I have a single view, consistent view of customer across all of my company. And again, I'm not blaming people. It's just trends I have seen, because we often are brought in our company to kind of look at warehouses that might not be working, et cetera. And I will see 6 different customer dimensions, one for each system. Well, that's really hard to quote conform. If I want to say revenue by customer, you don't want to necessarily say revenue by customer for system A and revenue by customer for system B. It kind of, you lose that power. And I've just seen that so much this year and even a bit of last. And I thought it'd be worth calling that out. Maybe because we have boring names for things like conform dimension, but the idea is, can we have one customer table for the whole company and have all of the systems feeding into that? Yes, it's a little harder because you need to join those things up, and that's master data, right? Have a single way to store names and addresses and things like that. So that drives these dashboards, right? So I want to know total sum of product by revenue is going to be your fact, and region is going to be your dimension, right? A couple other dimensions there, product, and et cetera, et cetera. So this, when I was learning this, helped me have a little light bulb moment. That's what you're talking about. And often when we talk to customers, or I'm doing a workshop with a business user, we often kind of show it this way. We're going to or a good old, I didn't show it in the slides, but a good old fashioned bus matrix, right? Where you have, what are you reporting on? What are you reporting by, is a nice way to kind of run this by the business when you're talking about analytics, because we architects on the call can show all those diagrams and everything, but when you're doing reporting and analytics, especially this type, your business intelligence, it's the thing on the left that the business is thinking about. So the more you can show your model or map your model, your architecture, and things on the left. Okay, if we want to slice widget sales by revenue, how do you calculate revenue? When you're saying year, is it fiscal year or calendar year? All the questions. It's often nice to literally show their dashboard and kind of show why you're asking, and why that architecture is, how that architecture is supporting it. I mean, because that one picture on the left is math. It looks so simple, but there's so many architecture decisions. What system or systems is it coming from? Is it from the sales system? Is it from the marketing system? Is the CRM, right? And all of that, right? So you need to kind of have that explicit, put that in a data catalog so everybody knows. So often starting from the front and working backwards when you're talking to the business can be really helpful because they kind of get why you're asking. So the other part of this, and as we're looking at what's in that little database cylinder that we had in the picture, there's different physical models for different use cases, and many of them are still and will continue to be valued. You know, I just had to put this in because I have a third normal form cartoon. Who does, right? Getting into third normal form. Anyway, relational databases are really good for keeping data quality, ensuring consistency, or ACID transactions means that this is really good for banking, right? I took money out of my account. I'm sure that there's only one transaction for that. It's clean. It is linked to everything else. It's linked to me, not somebody else. That's really what a lot of these relational databases are good for and can be continued to be good for. Often you take that relational, which might be your source system, and ETL or ELT that into a star schema for reporting. That really helps with some of those slicing and dicing. Those are common ones. I still see these all the time. They're excellent and very good. And there's other ones, right? So that might not be might be the fastest for things that you don't need all of that logic around. I just want to see website clicks, right? That I want to know just the place in the website and the ID of the person. So you want that high retrieval volume, flexibility to change the schema and things like that, where it isn't the rigor of something like enterprise product sales that have to go to the board for approval, right? It really is just that speed of retrieval, thing linked to thing, right? And this could be a whole website, sorry, a whole webinar on these different patterns. But for reporting analytics, which is the topic of this, so maybe your operational reporting might be in relational, right? Because I'm just trying to see things from the system. Your enterprise BI reporting might be in dimensional. I'm just trying to get some Google Analytics from my website clicks. That might be in NoSQL, et cetera, et cetera. I might use a graph database to try to see analytics on my customer patterns and who's speaking with whom, right? So it's a both and, right? I'm a fan of the relational to get your data quality right. And then from there, when you have data quality right, you can use a lot of different patterns for your analytics. It isn't all just third normal form. Please don't use third normal form for most of your reporting, I would say. So again, no modeling technique in and of itself is inherently better than another. What makes one better than the other is what your fit for purpose use case is. Should be obvious, but I've seen arguments across architects and just silly. It's not like one is better than the other. You look at your use case and then define what use case defines which model, because you have a lot of tools in your toolkit. Rant over. I just hear that too often, so I wanted to call that out. So I like to think of it in patterns. Do I have clean data? Once I have the clean data, how do I store it, report on it, and things like that? Inman versus Kimball, that battle still rages. I think there's a both hand there, right? I mean, a relational model can be really helpful to get the quality right. A dimensional model is good for your marts or for your reporting, your BI. Data Vault, there's a lot of really passionate folks there. A lot of what they say is that you can kind of store the data in kind of these they're not gonna love how I say this, but this kind of semi-modeled way that you can make the business decisions later, right? So you can store it in a very flexible way with hubs, links, and satellites, and then you can kind of transform that into different ways later, right? Columnar, so you can those are often good for kind of speed of retrieval and things like that, where you store it not from like rows like a spreadsheet, but it's more kind of focused on the columns. Flatten everything out, right? And if I'm a third normal form kind of I'm trying to do data quality, the fact that I see a single table with customer name, address, telephone number 1, telephone number 2, all of that in one big wide table is going to give me high. In fact, just this week I was at a client and people were arguing about that as if one person was right and one person was wrong. They're both right. When you're doing some data science or you're doing some analytics or even a good old report, even in data warehousing, your star schema, you flatten things out in your dimension tables. Not everything can and should be third normal form, and so I've seen just too often kind of the data science team arguing with the kind of maybe your more traditional data architecture team that you shouldn't flatten everything, or you should. It's at both and, but typically that flattened data or your big wide data sets should come from something like your master data, your warehouse, and everything, so that you know that it's correct, right? Graph I've talked a lot about before. That's really good for discovering connections. I keep using the kind of customer example of customer patterns, but you can use it for fraud detection. I see a lot of credit card transactions coming from the same IP address. It's because Donna stole all your credit cards and is now buying things all over the globe, right? Those kind of patterns, a lot of financial institutions use graph for things like that. So those are some that are kind of common in the analytics-y kind of world. But of course, there's more. And so this is a very ugly slide, but I threw it together because these are some common ones and kind of maybe showing where I like to almost think you saw the previous diagrams with the kind of that left to right, whereas left is your operational, kind of as you transform to the right, you're transforming it into a storage and then a consumption for reporting, analytics, etc. So, your relational database is still a good tried and true for a lot of your operational systems. It makes ACID transactions and things. Your web apps might have more of a key value pair for your web session, et cetera, right? When you transfer that, it could be JSON, XML, et cetera. There's different ways to exchange data between groups. Your master data at the bottom, often that's kind of in a more of a hierarchy or a relational type format. And then when you're storing it, a lot of folks store it in, there's a cadre of folks that store it in Vault for that flexible storage. You don't have to make all of the business decisions yet, but it's sort of, there are rules in that you can kind of break out later. Your relational database, maybe more your in-min approach, can be there for your standards, the star schema for slicing and dicing, cubes on your consumption pattern might be really good, or your semantic layer, or what folks call it now, can be really good for your BI, those flattened out tables. For analytics and data science, you could have a time sequence data set, which can be really good for certain kinds of advanced analytics, graph for your patterns, etc. So you'll see here that this is not a really crazy next generation type company that's doing out of the world amazing things with next gen. This is kind of standard, that you're going to have several different data model patterns to have your analytics, and you're going to have several analytics patterns. You're going to have BI, you're going to have some sort of analytics or AI or other ways to look at data, doing forecasting or predictive analytics, or I can't think of the words, correlation between data sets and things like that don't fit really nice into selling widgets by region, right? So again, it's a both hand, but just think of that in terms of when you're talking to someone else that feels like they're talking in a different world. Again, I was at a client today and it was two groups of really, really smart people, and we were sort of between them both, and they were like talking on different planets, because one was talking they were sort of PhD analytics folks on one side and traditional BI data warehousing folks in the other, and they weren't talking to each other. Same data, it was customer data, right? But kind of, so maybe just think of something like this, of what's the pattern, what's my use case, and how might I store it? So as always, you are not a shy crowd, and I know this chat and Q&A. So, just in summary, analytics and reporting is and will continue to be, I put AI kind of in analytics for now, right? It's only growing, and to grow, you need that strong data architecture from the hardware, from the software, from the system, and from the good old how you model the data within your systems. So just choose it wisely, and I will say that last bullet there, have fun. It can be stressful, it can be overwhelming because stuff changes so fast. Again, I've been doing this for years. I'm a DATAVERSITY, member, and I still feel like, dumb because things, so I usually, take some time on a day and in the evening or whatever, and push outside your comfort zone. Try some of these cloud platforms where you can test out some of these patterns that you're not familiar with. And really, I would say, if you're only using one of the patterns that I talked about, maybe they make that your goal for this year, to just try out one of those others to see if, I do see, to see if that's something that can help you. I do see, we all kind of fit into our ruts. Is there something new that could really help some of my use cases that I just haven't had time to look at? So with that, I will give a little bit of a plug for the rest of this year's lineup. Kind of the cousin to this conversation is, okay, there's all these different areas of architecture and platform, et cetera. Like, who does this? What's the difference between an architect and an engineer and a scientist, and how do you get the roles to support all of this? So we hear this question so much, we're doing a webinar on it, so hopefully you can join us. And with that, I'll give a little bit of a plug to Global Data Strategy. We do this for a living if you need help. And with that, I'll pass it over to Shannon for some Q&A.
Anna, thank you so much. Oh, and how I've missed your rants. I love your rants. I do. If you have questions for Donna or for Sri Raj, feel free to put them in the Q&A panel. And just to answer the most commonly asked questions, I will send a follow-up email by end of day Monday for this webinar with links to the slides and links to the recording of the webinar. So diving in here, there's a question that came in early on, Sri Raj, how does the Reltio improve low quality source data and master it?
Sure. Thank you, Shannon. So within Reltio or any master data platform, commonly found master data platforms, there's a number of inbuilt cleansers, whether it's an email cleanser, whether it's an address cleanser, name cleanser, phone cleanser, so on and so forth. So that's one approach of how you improve low quality source data. The other commonly used technique is to integrate with third-party enrichment sources, whether it's Dun & Bradstreet, whether it is ZoomInfo or IQVIA, so on and so forth, right? So a combination of both these techniques helps improve the low quality source data with these third-party as well as inbuilt cleansers. The key to doing that, however, is having a robust unification, because you can't cleanse it unless you can identify it in some form or fashion. So that's the key, and that's where Reltio excels at.
I'll put in my 2 cents, even though it wasn't asked to me. But yeah, I would agree with that. And I think, Reltio had 5 minutes, but I think in your presentation, there were a lot of those components that we just glossed. You kind of talked to that, but the beauty of MDM, Master Data Management, is that it helps fix that quality over time. You get those golden records and can push that back to source, right? So you can do all that match merge, and it isn't only for analytics. It's going to clean your source systems over time too. So it's kind of that nice virtual cycle. Virtuous cycle. Sorry, can't use words today.
Those days. Everyone's so quiet today.
Maybe everyone's having a day like that. Well, that's uncharacteristic at Dataversity.
I know.
We said more controversial things.
I know. I come back and to host, and y'all are super quiet. No question.
That's it. You killed it, Shannon.
I did. Maybe it's just spring at y'all on spring break.
I'll touch some of the chat. I'll just kind of address, that we didn't put. I talked about a vector database, and then I didn't have it in my architecture diagram. Noted. Yeah, that was just a sample, but yes, I think that is something that we could put in, especially if you look at the AI. I think I had it just going off raw data, which maybe makes sense, maybe it doesn't. Something I saw. I think some other folks were saying that you don't have to choose kind of Inman and Kimball and relational and dimensional. I would agree with that. There's a lot of good choices out there.
A lot of good choices. Oh, and the questions are rolling in now. I love it. So Donna, so how many source system owners have you met who readily accept a third-party MDM system overriding their own master records?
I think a lot, but I know where the question's coming from. That can sound really, really scarier. Gosh, I cannot talk today. Well, I think it's both the owners of the systems and systems themselves, right? I've heard how many times we don't need master data management. We have a CRM. I'm the source of the truth. All the systems want to be the source of truth, right? And I myself would probably be nervous when you say I'm going to have this other system and automatically update your system. So how do you overcome that? One is good governance, right? All of those system owners should be involved in the data quality rules, in the critical data elements of what we're storing, how we match merge. I know that sounds really nerdy and that they're not interested, but if you say it the right way, this is literally their data. So we're going to match on customer. Do we use name, first name, last name? Do you guys track social? Should we use email? Please don't, because people have more than one email, right? And then what are the quality rules? And then another way to you don't do it all at once. Please don't do it all at once. You can have those owners involved in those design decisions. Do we, Shiraz's point, augment with third-party data? If so, which systems, right? They're part of it. And then I often say, start with the analytics part of MDM first, put it in the warehouse. Worst case, you don't want wrong data, but worst case, you're just reporting on that wrong data, and you can fix it over time. Then once you get that trust, you can start pushing back to source because they've already trusted it in the warehouse. And then even then, sometimes I do it in a phased approach where a lot of the good MDM tools out there have kind of a, what do you call it, human in the loop. So they can say, hey, we merged John Smith with John H. Smith. Is this correct? And they can say yes. And then you can train the algorithm. And over time, they'll have to approve less and less. They'll be like, okay, 99.9% of the ones I approved are good. I trust the system now. So yeah, please just don't, it's not necessarily technically hard to do that. You can link all the systems up, but it's a change management, and don't make sure you're testing it kind of along the way and bring people along that journey. But I'm curious what Shiraz, what you feel at Reltio, what your approach is.
No, I agree with everything that you said. I think it's the what we call as tuning of the system happens over time, obviously. So what we've often seen in our customer implementations is that customers tend to start off a little bit on the conservative side, delegating fewer things to automatic functions in the system. But as the stewardship gains, as the data stewards gain more confidence, then they loosen up the tuning a little bit, so the system can do more recommendations. And especially within Reltio, we've invested heavily in some machine learning models as well as AI models, so that the system is able to give data stewards recommendations on, hey, I think these based on, and these models have been trained on vast data sets from our experience. So based on that, the system is able to give right off the bat, this is what we recommend. So the confidence that users gain is higher when they're leveraging such models.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say building the trust over time in a slow way makes a lot of sense, because it will be right, but you need to convince people, make sure you're right, and then bring people along. So yeah, I agree with that.
So, do you know when you should use surrogate keys versus composite keys?
Classic question. So if the basic gist of that question, if those words don't make sense to people, is like, you can create a surrogate. My name is Donna Burbank, but my I don't know, my customer ID is 123, right? It's really easy in a database to join up keys. And I've had that. I've done a whole master data workshop training session, and someone comes up like, I don't know why you just did that whole thing. You just link up the keys in the system. Like, well, yeah, if everything were clean and Donna Burbank had the same key and we knew all that, we wouldn't have to do MDM, but we don't. So often this kind of business key or composite key is, how do I know that Donna Burbank is there more than one Donna Burbank in the planet? Yes. In fact, I've looked it up. There's some strange Donna Burbanks out there. So yes, is it someone with my middle name? Is it someone with my social? What data do you have at your disposal? And then eventually, I think you can get to that point where some of those, or if you already know we're working with one customer, and their problem with MDM is pretty rare. Isn't that they can't match up? It was the subscribing out and things like that. So I think at the end of the day, when everything's perfect, and that's something that your MDM systems can do. They create this golden record, and they do that matching off the composite and business keys, and then they can create your numeric key to link that across systems. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. But Shiraz, any other thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I think what you said is perfectly aligned with what I'm thinking as well. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, well, we have 2 minutes left, so I'm going to try and slip in one more question here. At least, do you prefer to have MDM solutions derived from the data in the data warehouse lakehouse, or as a separate service managed outside the data warehouse?
I want to be careful in answering that, because it's a nuanced answer, but I feel pretty strongly that if you meant platform, that's one thing, but it's separate, right? Because what you do not want to do is I can use my words today. Master data feeds the warehouse, right? Master data is that, I almost think of it as like the liver that cleans all the blood and everything before pushing it back. Sometimes I almost call it a mini MDM. If you're just doing data warehouse, you kind of have to do some mastering for your conform dimensions and figure out how to join up customers. And so I also often go through that build versus buy. I have platform X, and I have a days in it, just like a database where you match everything up, and I fall for that very often. I would say a very small percentage of my customers do we actually do that. You might do it as a test for learning, but once you look at these tools, by the time you build everything, they have workflow, they have some of the algorithms pre-built, they have a lot of the connectors to systems. So I generally say it is a separate tool or a separate ecosystem environment, your MDM hub. I like to call it a hub because it's going to feed not only your warehouse but your operational systems. Whether it might sit on AWS and so does your warehouse, or sit in both beyond Snowflake or something like that. That's kind of a different. But I like to think of it as a separate hub that can integrate with both your warehouse and your operational systems. But I like Reltio's thought on that as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, this is the traditional conundrum which many customers have. Where does it sit? But what we've seen is that with the evolution of master data, obviously, it's not just the data warehouse that's consuming it, but it's a lot of your operational systems also. Whether it's your sales system, your service system, you're servicing a customer out there, and you want to know who that customer is. You need the best version of truth about that customer and their interactions with you. So in that sense, it's better to be outside, because traditionally data warehouses aren't meant or aren't designed for real-time operational applications out there. So an MDM system that's designed fit for purpose would probably serve those better. So that argument has evolved from being part of a warehouse or analytical storage to now being truly in the operational or above all of this, so it can feed both analytical and operational needs.
Great.
Perfect. Well, thank you both so much. But I'm afraid that is all the time we have for. Thanks for everyone for jumping in and submitting those questions. Great questions. And just a reminder, I will send a follow-up email by end of day Monday with links to the slides and links to the recording of this session. Thanks everybody for your participation, and thanks to Reltio for sponsoring today's webinar and helping to make these webinars happen.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, y'all.